The sanctuary's silence shattered as 300 phones pinged simultaneously. I did not need to look to know my humiliation was viral. He was at O'Hare. Flying to Bali with her, I stood frozen in a $15,000 dress that felt like a shroud until a firm hand gripped my waist. It was not my father, but my ruthless boss, Sterling Vance. He leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. Pretend I am the groom. My name is Eloise Hardwick, and I was staring at a reflection I no longer recognized in the antique mirror of the bridal suite at the Monarch. The room smelled of expensive lilies and hairspray, a cloying combination that was beginning to make my stomach turn. Everything was technically perfect. My dress, a cloud of silk and lace that had cost $15,000, fit my frame with the precision of architectural engineering. My makeup was flawless, designed to withstand tears of joy. Not the cold sweat that was currently prickling along my hairline, but beneath the layers of tulle and the veneer of a blushing bride, a cold, hard knot of dread was tightening in my chest. It had been 3 hours since I last heard from Liam. Liam was not the type to go silent. He was a tech entrepreneur, a man whose thumb was permanently fused to the screen of his phone, scrolling through market data and social media feeds. He lived for the notification ping. His last message to me had arrived at midnight the night before. Just 3 simple words: I love you. Since then, nothing. Radio silence. I had called him 6 times. I had texted him twice that number. The silence that answered me felt heavy, like the air before a tornado touches down in the Midwest. You are just nervous, Elle, my mother had said 10 minutes ago, patting my hand with a trembling excitement that only a mother marrying off her daughter to a tech millionaire could possess. He is probably just dealing with a last-minute investor's call. You know how the startup world is. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that my biggest problem right now was a groom running 20 minutes late due to a server crash or a venture capital emergency. But as I walked out of the suite and stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the congregation seated in the vaulted sanctuary, the dread morphed into nausea. The guests were shifting in their seats. I could hear the rustling of silk and the clearing of throats. A collective restlessness that was louder than the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon for the 5th time. Among the 300 guests were my colleagues from Nexus Global, the media conglomerate where I had spent the last 5 years of my life working as a mid-level public relations strategist. They were not just guests, they were sharks in formal wear. I saw the marketing team whispering behind their manicured hands. I saw the junior executives checking their watches, their eyes darting toward the empty space at the altar where Liam should have been standing. Nexus Global was a brutal environment, a place where weakness was blood in the water. I had fought tooth and nail to maintain a professional, unshakable image there, but standing here, alone in a $15,000 dress, I felt stripped of all my armor. Their eyes were not filled with admiration. They were filled with pity, and worse, some held a gleam of malicious anticipation. Then, it happened. It did not start with a scream or a crash. It started with a sound that defines our generation, a notification tone. Ping, then another. Ping, ding, chirp, within 5 seconds. The sacred silence of the sanctuary was obliterated by a cacophony of digital alerts. It was a wave of sound, starting from the back row where the younger cousins sat and rolling forward like a tsunami until it hit the front pew where my parents were sitting. 300 phones lit up almost simultaneously. The string quartet faltered and stopped, their bows hovering uncertainly over the strings. I froze on the landing. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I did not need to check my own phone to know what was happening. I could see it on their faces, the shock, the gasps, the sudden, synchronized turning of heads to look up at me, down in the second row. A girl from the accounting department, someone I had shared lunch with just 2 weeks ago, forgot to mute her volume. A voice blared out from her phone, amplified by the sudden silence of the room. It was Liam's voice. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and dizzy. I cannot do it. Guys, Liam's voice echoed, tinny and distorted but unmistakably him. I just cannot be tied down. Eloise is a great girl. She is safe. She is stable. But I am an innovator. I need chaos. I need passion. I need freedom to create. And frankly, looking at a future with her feels like staring at a blank spreadsheet. I am choosing me. I am choosing life. The video cut off. But the damage was absolute. My knees buckled, but I grabbed the banister, my knuckles turning white. He was live streaming, my fiancé, the man who had held me when my grandmother died, the man who had promised me forever just 24 hours ago, was breaking up with me via a live broadcast to the entire world, and from the background noise in the video, the distinct chime of an airport announcement, he was not just leaving me, he was leaving the country. The sanctuary erupted. "Oh my God!" someone shrieked. I saw my mother stand up, her hand clutching her chest, her face a mask of gray horror. She swayed once, then collapsed into my aunt's arms, fainting dead away. My father roared, a sound of pure, primal rage, and swept his arm across the table next to him, sending a tray of crystal champagne flutes shattering onto the marble floor. The crash of glass was the punctuation mark to the end of my life as I knew it. "Is this a joke?" someone shouted. "Check the location." A voice from the Nexus Global Cluster sneered. "He is checking in from O'Hare, first class to Bali." I felt like I was drowning on dry land. My lungs were heaving, trying to pull in oxygen. But the air felt thin, non-existent. The room began to spin. The faces below me blurred into a watercolor of judgment and mockery. And then, I saw the phones rise. It was a nightmare of the modern age. The people I worked with, the people I had invited to share my joy, were now holding their smartphones high. Cameras pointed directly at me. They were not documenting a wedding anymore. They were documenting a disaster. I could see the red recording lights blinking like predatory eyes. They were live streaming my humiliation. I was no longer Eloise Hardwick, the diligent PR strategist. I was the abandoned bride. I was content. I was a meme in the making. Run. My brain screamed. Get out. Hide. I turned, desperate to flee back into the bridal suite, to lock the door and never come out until I dissolved into dust. I grabbed the heavy skirts of my gown, bunching the silk in my trembling hands, but the dress was too heavy, too voluminous. As I pivoted, the heel of my satin shoe caught in the hem of the intricate lace train. I pitched forward. The world tilted. I slammed onto the carpeted landing. The breath knocked out of me. My veil tore, sliding askew over my face. I lay there, a heap of white tulle and misery, listening to the collective gasp of the crowd below. This was it. This was rock bottom. I waited for the laughter. I waited for the final crushing weight of shame to bury me, but the laughter did not come. Instead, the room fell into a sudden, suffocating hush, the kind of silence that happens when a predator enters a clearing. I blinked back tears, staring at the floor. Into my field of vision stepped a pair of shoes. They were not the scuffed rental shoes of a groomsman, nor the sensible loafers of a guest. They were black, hand-stitched Italian leather, polished to a mirror shine that reflected the lights of the chandelier above. They cost more than my father's car. My gaze traveled up the sharp crease of midnight blue tuxedo trousers, past a tailored jacket that fit with military precision. I knew that suit. I knew the scent that suddenly cut through the smell of lilies, a sharp, commanding blend of sandalwood, aged scotch, and absolute authority. I looked up, and my breath hitched in my throat. Sterling Vance stood over me. He was the CEO of Nexus Global, a man the business press called the media tyrant. In the 5 years I had worked at his company, he had never looked at me for longer than 3 seconds. He was a man who fired executives for using the wrong font in a presentation. He was a man who had acquired and dismantled 3 rival networks before breakfast. He was terrifying, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. And he was here, at my wedding, because my father had insisted we invite the big boss out of courtesy, never expecting him to actually show up. I braced myself. He was going to fire me. I was making a scene. I was embarrassing the company. My personal tragedy was dragging the Nexus Global brand through the mud of a viral social media scandal. Mr. Vance, I whispered, my voice cracking, waiting for the termination. Sterling Vance did not speak. He did not look at the cameras flashing below. He did not look at my weeping mother or my raging father. His eyes, the color of a stormy Atlantic Ocean, were locked on mine. They were cold, unreadable, and terrifyingly intense. He reached down. He did not offer a tentative hand. He gripped my arm with a strength that was shocking. His fingers digging into my skin through the lace sleeve. It was not a comforting touch. It was a command. He hauled me to my feet in one fluid motion, pulling me close enough that the lapel of his tuxedo brushed against my cheek. I wobbled, my legs shaking violently, but his arms snaked around my waist, clamping me to his side like a vice. He was a wall of solid muscle and heat. He held me up when I should have collapsed. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, to the crowd. It must have looked like a gesture of profound intimacy. "Perform," he hissed, his voice a low vibration against my skin. "Do not let these vultures see you bleed. Eloise, stand up straight." I stiffened, shock overriding my grief for a split second. He knew my name. Before I could process what was happening, Sterling turned us toward the stunned congregation. He looked down at the sea of gaping mouths and raised phones. He did not look angry. He looked bored. He looked like a king surveying a court of jesters. "Put the phones away," Sterling commanded. His voice was not loud, yet it carried to the back of the cathedral without a microphone. It was the voice that moved markets. "Unless you want your employment contracts reviewed for violation of the privacy policy by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." The threat was specific, immediate, and effective. Within 10 seconds, every phone in the hands of a Nexus employee vanished into a pocket or purse. The silence was now absolute. Sterling adjusted his cufflinks, the picture of unbothered arrogance. He looked at the empty altar where Liam should have been, then turned his gaze back to the crowd. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark that had just found a way to eat the boat. "It appears," Sterling said, his voice smooth as velvet and sharp as a razor, "that the beta test is concluded." A ripple of confusion went through the room. "Beta test," someone whispered. "Liam was a necessary distraction," Sterling continued, his lie flowing as easily as if he were reading a teleprompter. "A media experiment to test the loyalty of our circle and the resilience of my bride. We needed to know who was here for the spectacle and who was here for the union." He paused, letting the words sink in. He pulled me tighter against him, his fingers splaying possessively over the silk of my waist. I stared at him, my eyes wide, unable to breathe. What was he doing? "The test is over," Sterling announced, his voice dropping an octave, becoming intimate, lethal, and shockingly convincing. "The actor has left the stage. It is time for the real ceremony to begin." He looked down at me, and for a second, the coldness in his eyes shifted into something that looked terrifyingly like adoration. "I believe," Sterling Vance said, loud enough for the entire world to hear, "that I am the groom you have been waiting for." The silence that followed Sterling Vance's declaration was heavier than the $15,000 dress weighing down my trembling body. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the cathedral until my lungs burned. "A beta test." My mother's voice quavered from the front row. Breaking the spell, she was fanning herself frantically with a hymn program. "You mean Liam was a test?" Sterling did not blink. He did not look at her. He looked only at me, his eyes demanding a submission I was not sure I could give. But then my training kicked in. 5 years of crisis management at Nexus Global. 5 years of spinning disasters into opportunities. I looked at the cameras, still blinking with their red recording lights. I looked at the faces of the colleagues who had been ready to meme my misery into internet history. If I denied this, I was the woman left at the altar by a man who chose Bali over a bride. I was the joke. I was finished. If I agreed, I was the secret lover of the most powerful man in Chicago. I was a player in a game so high level that Liam was merely a pawn. My survival instinct, sharp and desperate, clawed its way up my throat. "Yes," I said. My voice was a whisper, but in the dead silence, it carried like a shout. I looked up at Sterling, locking my jaw to stop it from trembling. "We tired of the charade. Sterling, it is time." A flicker of something passed through Sterling's eyes. Approval, surprise. It was gone before I could decipher it, replaced by his trademark mask of icy command. He turned to Reverend Miller, who was standing with his mouth open, clutching his Bible as if it were a shield against a sudden demonic possession. "Proceed, Reverend," Sterling ordered. It was not a request. It was the tone he used when he told the board of directors to liquidate a subsidiary. But Mr. Vance," the Reverend stammered, looking from the empty spot where Liam should have been to the imposing figure in the midnight blue tuxedo, "the license, the paperwork, the names. My legal team is filing the necessary amendments with the county clerk as we speak." Sterling lied smoothly. I knew for a fact his legal team was probably on the golf course, but nobody questioned Sterling Vance when he spoke with that level of absolute certainty. "Do we need to discuss the donation for the new church roof again, Reverend, or can we proceed with the union?" The Reverend swallowed hard. The threat was veiled in charity, but it was a threat nonetheless. "We shall proceed." Sterling took my hand. His palm was dry, hot, and rougher than I expected for a man who spent his days in boardrooms. He pulled me up the remaining steps to the altar. My legs felt like lead. Every step was a surrender. I was walking away from the wreckage of my life and straight into the fire. "The rings?" the Reverend asked, his voice shaking. Liam had the rings. He had taken them, along with my dignity. Sterling did not hesitate. He raised his right hand and pulled the heavy, gold signet ring from his pinky finger. It was a massive piece of jewelry, engraved with the Vance family crest, a wolf holding a dagger. It looked ancient and cruel. "Give me your hand," he murmured. I held out my left hand. He slid the heavy gold ring onto my thumb. It was too big even for that, but he closed my fingers over it, his grip tightening around my fist. It felt less like a ring and more like a shackle. "With this ring," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the hollow of my chest, "I claim you, not as a burden, but as an asset. I vow to shield you from the storm, as long as you remain standing in my shadow." The crowd swooned. They thought it was poetic. I heard the dark contract beneath the words, "I own you now." The Reverend looked at me. I had nothing. My fingers were bare. Sterling simply unbuttoned his cufflink, a diamond stud set in platinum, and pressed it into my palm. "Improvise," he whispered. Barely moving his lips, I took the cold metal. I reached for his hand. His fingers were long, artistic, and intimidating. I pretended to slide a ring onto his finger, keeping the cufflink hidden in my palm as I traced the line of his knuckle. "I take you," I stammered, my mind racing to find words that would not choke me. "To be my partner, to share the silence and the noise, in front of the world, and in the dark. You may kiss the bride." The words hung in the air. This was the seal. If we failed this, the lie would crumble. Sterling did not lean in gently. He stepped into my personal space, his hand sliding up my neck to grip the base of my skull. It was a possessive hold, forcing my head back. He looked down at me for 1 second, his eyes searching mine, warning me, "Don't flinch." Then his mouth crashed onto mine. It was not a romantic kiss. It was a conquest. His lips were firm, demanding, and skilled. He kissed me as if he were trying to extract a confession, his other arm winding around my waist and pulling me so hard against him that I gasped. Opening my mouth, he took the opportunity to deepen the kiss, invading my senses with the taste of scotch and mint. My knees gave out for real this time, but he held me up, turning my weakness into a dramatic dip that made the cameras flash like a lightning storm. For 5 seconds, the world dissolved. I forgot Liam. I forgot the 300 people watching. There was only the heat of this stranger's body, and the terrifying realization that my heart was racing not out of fear, but out of a sudden, electric shock of adrenaline. When he pulled back, I was breathless. My lips felt bruised. The sanctuary erupted in applause. It was deafening. They bought it. They bought it all. "Smile," Sterling commanded through his teeth. While beaming at the crowd, I forced a smile. It felt brittle, like cracked glass. We turned to face the congregation. My parents were standing now. My father looked like he was about to have a stroke. His face was a map of confusion and fury. He started to step into the aisle, his fists clenched. "Sterling," I whispered urgently. "My dad." Sterling nodded imperceptibly. He led me down the aisle, moving with a stride that forced me to half-run to keep up. When we reached my parents, he did not stop. He simply paused for a fraction of a second, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. "Mr. Hardwick," Sterling said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly polite. "We will discuss the details of the dowry and the settlement of your mortgage at the reception. I believe you will find my terms generous. For now, smile for the cameras. Your daughter just became the most powerful woman in Chicago media." My father froze. The mention of the mortgage, a secret debt I knew he was struggling with, paralyzed him. Sterling knew. He knew everything. We swept past them, out of the sanctuary, and into the blinding sunlight of the hotel courtyard where the reception tent was set up. As we walked, I saw a bridesmaid, Sarah from HR, staring at her phone with wide eyes. She turned the screen toward me as we passed. It was Liam's live stream. He was still broadcasting from the airport lounge, but now, his face was twisted in an ugly red rage. He was screaming at the screen. "That is a lie," Liam was yelling, spitting at his camera. "She is lying. Vance is lying. She is boring. She is mine." Why are they cheering? I felt a surge of cold, vindictive satisfaction. His plan to ruin me had backfired. He wanted to leave a tragic victim. Instead, he had created a mystery. The reception was a blur of technicolor nightmare. I was thrust into the role of the happy bride, accepting congratulations from people who, an hour ago, were ready to laugh at my funeral. I danced with Sterling. His hand burned a hole through the silk of my dress. "Why?" I asked him as we swayed to a jazz ballad in the center of the dance floor. The guests were watching us like hawks. Why me? Why this insane lie? Sterling spun me around, his grip tightening. He leaned down, his cheek brushing mine so we could speak without being overheard. "The Henderson merger," he whispered. I pulled back slightly to look at him, but he forced me back into the embrace. "The conservative media group?" I asked. "Old man Henderson is dying," Sterling murmured. "He wants to sell, but he refuses to sell to a soulless corporate raider or a bachelor with a playboy reputation. He wants a family man. He wants stability. He wants traditional values." I almost laughed. It was hysterical. "So you married me to close a deal." "I married you because I had a problem, and you were standing there in a white dress with a problem of your own," Sterling said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I need a wife for 6 months until the deal is signed and vetted by the FCC. You need your reputation salvaged and your family's financial mess cleaned up. It is a transaction, Eloise, nothing more." A transaction. Of course. The song ended. The applause washed over us again. I curtsied, as he had instructed me to do with a squeeze of his hand. "The car is waiting," he announced to the room. "My wife and I require privacy." We exited the ballroom under a shower of white rose petals. Running toward the waiting black limousine parked at the curb, the chauffeur held the door open. Sterling bundled me inside, protecting my head with his hand, playing the perfect gentleman for the paparazzi swarming the sidewalk. He climbed in after me. The heavy door slammed shut with a final, sealing thud. The tint on the windows was pitch black. The noise of the outside world, the cheering, the camera shutters, the questions was instantly cut off. The smile vanished from Sterling's face instantly. It was as if a switch had been flipped. He leaned back against the leather seat, loosening his bow tie with a weary, Annoyed motion. He did not look at me. He pulled a crystal tumbler from the car's bar and poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid. I sat on the opposite seat, my massive dress taking up most of the space. The silence in the car was suffocating. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me shivering and nauseous. "So," I said, my voice sounding small in the plush interior. "We are married." Sterling took a sip of his drink, swirling the liquid around the glass. He looked at me then, his eyes cold, assessing, calculating. There was no warmth, no fake adoration, just the look of a man who had just bought a complicated piece of machinery and was wondering if it would work. "Verbally," he corrected. "My lawyers will have the non-disclosure agreements and the prenup ready by the time we reach the tower. Do not get comfortable. Eloise, you are an employee who has just been given a very difficult assignment." He extended his hand, not to hold mine, but to offer a shake. "Welcome to the inner circle," he said. "Do not make me regret saving you." I looked at his hand. I looked at the fake ring on my thumb. I realized then that I had not escaped the tragedy. I had just traded a heartbreak for a deal with the devil. I reached out and shook his hand. "I won't," I said. The limo accelerated, merging into the Chicago traffic, carrying us away from the church and toward a future that felt darker than the tinted windows shielding us from the sun. The elevator doors to the penthouse of the Vance Tower slid open with a soft, pneumatic hiss, revealing a space that was less a home and more a mausoleum of modern art and aggressive wealth. I stepped out, my heels clicking loudly on the black marble floor. The space was vast, walled entirely in glass that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, glittering like a spilled jewelry box against the night sky. But it was cold. Not just temperature cold, though the air conditioning was set to a brisk 65 degrees, but spiritually cold. There were no personal photographs, no throw pillows indented from use, no stack of unread mail on a counter. It was the complete opposite of the cozy, cluttered brownstone in Lincoln Park I had spent years dreaming of buying with Liam. That dream had smelled of cinnamon and old paper. This reality smelled of ozone and lemon polish. "The guest suite is down the hall to the left," Sterling said, walking past me without glancing back. He had already untied his bow tie, letting it hang loose around his neck like a raveled noose. "The master is on the right. Do not enter the master unless the building is on fire." "Understood," I said, my voice echoing in the cavernous living room. He headed for a wet bar made of backlit onyx and poured himself another scotch. I stood there, feeling ridiculous in my $15,000 gown, which was now beginning to itch furiously around the bodice. I needed to get out of it. I needed to scrub the hairspray off my scalp and the humiliation off my skin. I retreated to the guest suite. It was larger than my entire apartment. The bathroom was a sanctuary of white marble with a bathtub the size of a small swimming pool. I turned my back to the wall-sized mirror and reached over my shoulder to find the hidden zipper of my dress. It would not budge. I tugged harder. The delicate silk caught in the metal teeth. Panic, sharp and irrational, flared in my chest. I twisted my body, straining my arms until my shoulders burned, but the zipper was jammed fast. I was trapped. I was trapped in this dress, trapped in this penthouse, trapped in this lie. The fabric felt like it was shrinking, squeezing the air out of my lungs. I let out a sound of frustration, a half sob that I quickly stifled. I could not sleep in this. I could not cut it off because I did not have scissors. I had to ask him. The walk back to the living room felt like a march to the gallows. Sterling was standing by the window, staring out at the city he practically owned, his jacket discarded on a leather armchair, the white dress shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, the fabric translucent enough to hint at the muscle beneath. "Sterling," I said. He turned slowly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. His expression was guarded. "Cold feet already, Mrs. Vance." "The zipper," I said, turning around and presenting my back to him like a penitent child. "It is stuck. I cannot get out." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that made the hair on the nape of my neck stand up. Then I heard the soft thud of his glass being set down on a coaster. I heard his footsteps approaching slow, deliberate beats on the marble. "Hold still," he murmured. I felt his hands on my back. His fingers were warm, a shocking contrast to the air-conditioned chill of the room. He brushed aside the lace detailing, his knuckles grazing the bare skin of my spine. A jolt of electricity shot through me, so intense I nearly gasped. It was not sexual. I told myself, it was just the reaction of a nervous system that had been overloaded with cortisol for 12 hours. "You have caught the silk in the track," he said, his voice low and near my ear. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest, inches from my back. "Take a deep breath. You are tense." I inhaled shakily. He worked the zipper with surprising patience. There was an intimacy to this moment that felt dangerous. This was the man who signed my paychecks. This was the man who had terrified me for 5 years. And now he was undressing me in his penthouse. With a sharp tug and a smooth slide, the zipper gave way. The dress loosened instantly, pooling around my hips. I clutched the front of the bodice to my chest to keep it from falling completely. "Thank you," I breathed, preparing to bolt back to my room. "Wait," Sterling said. I froze. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the long leather sofa. "We have business to conclude." I hesitated, then walked over, gathering the heavy skirts of the dress around me as I sat on the edge of the sofa. Sterling sat in the armchair opposite me, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. The distance between us was polite, but his gaze bridged the gap with terrifying intensity. 1 year, Sterling said. "That is the timeline." 1 year, I repeated. 365 days, he clarified. "The Henderson acquisition will take 6 months to close, and another 6 months for the regulatory dust to settle. During that time, we must be the picture of domestic bliss. We attend galas. We host dinners. You smile at my jokes. I hold your hand in public, in private. You stay out of my way, and I stay out of yours." "And what do I get?" I asked, finding a reserve of courage I did not know I possessed. "Besides a fake husband who treats me like a merger asset," Sterling smirked. It was a dark, humorless expression. "You get the position of Director of Strategy, effective immediately. Your salary triples. I have already instructed my personal banker to wire $400,000 to your father's creditor. His mortgage is gone. His gambling debts are gone." My breath hitched. He knew about the gambling debts. My father had hidden them from everyone, even Mom. "And," Sterling continued, leaning closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I offer you the one thing you want more than money, more than security." "What is that?" "Liam," he said. The name hung in the air like a curse. "You do not just want to survive this. Eloise, you want him to hurt. You want him to regret the moment he boarded that plane. I have the resources to burn his little startup to the ground. I can blacklist him from every tech incubator in Silicon Valley. I can make sure that when he crawls back from Bali, he comes back to a lawsuit, not a launch party." I stared at him. The morality of it should have bothered me. I should have been the better person. I should have taken the high road. But I remembered the sound of 300 phones pinging. I remembered the laughter. I remembered the text message "I love you" sent 6 hours before he destroyed me. Something dark and hard solidified in my chest. "Why me?" I asked. "There are 1,000 women in Chicago who would sign this contract for free. Models, heiresses. Why the PR girl from the 34th floor?" Sterling looked at me for a long moment. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making them look like shattered glass. "Because you are the only one," he said quietly. "In 5 years, through 3 rounds of layoffs and a dozen screaming meltdowns in the boardroom, you are the only person at Nexus Global who has ever looked me in the eye when I'm angry. Everyone else looks at the floor. Everyone else cowers. You just stand there and wait for me to finish. I need a partner who does not flinch. Eloise, and you have a spine of steel under all that lace." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" I looked at his hand. I looked at the man who was offering me a sword when I had been left defenseless. I released my grip on the dress with one hand and took his. 1 year, I said. And I want to be the one who pushes the button on Liam. Agreed, Sterling said. He did not smile. He nodded, a solemn acknowledgement of a pact made in blood and ink. I went to bed that night in the guest room. The sheets were Egyptian cotton with a thread count that probably equaled my student loan debt. I lay there in the dark, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. I felt like a traveler who had sought shelter from a storm in a dragon's cave. The dragon was sleeping down the hall. He was dangerous. He was lethal. But for the first time in 24 hours, I knew that no wolves would dare come near the cave entrance. I slept a dreamless, exhausted sleep. I woke to the smell of coffee-rich, dark roast that smelled like money. Sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then the events of yesterday crashed down on me. I grabbed the tablet that had been left on the nightstand. The headlines were screaming, Media Cinderella and the Dark Prince, the $2 billion kiss, Sterling Vance off the market. Who is the mystery bride? I tapped on the financial news. Nexus Global stock was up 15% in pre-market trading. The market loved a stability narrative. Sterling had just made millions while I was sleeping. I put on the silk robe that had been laid out for me and walked into the living room. Sterling was already there, dressed in a sharp gray suit, reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper. "Good morning, wife," he said without looking up. "Your parents are in the lobby. Security is sending them up." "My parents," I choked. "Now." "They want answers," Sterling said calmly. "And your father probably wants to know if his legs are going to be broken by loan sharks. Go get dressed. Put on something authoritative." 10 minutes later, I was standing next to Sterling as the elevator opened. My mother looked pale and weepy. My father looked like a man walking to his execution. "Eloise," my mother cried, rushing to hug me. "Oh, honey, we were so worried. We called all night." "We turned off the phones," Sterling interjected smoothly, stepping to my side and placing a protective hand on my lower back. We needed a moment to ourselves after the excitement. My father narrowed his eyes at Sterling. "Mr. Vance, I appreciate you saving my daughter's dignity yesterday, but I am not a fool. You two have never spoken outside of work. What is this?" Sterling's face softened. It was a transformation so complete, it was terrifying. He looked at my father with a respectful, almost boyish earnestness. "Sir," Sterling said, "I admit, the timing was unconventional, but Eloise and I have maintained a professional distance that masked a personal affection for over 6 months. When I saw that boy abandon her, I could not stand by and watch the woman I respect, the woman I love, be humiliated. I acted on impulse, but I do not regret it." He squeezed my waist gently. I leaned into him, playing my part. "Daddy, it is true. We were just scared to tell you because he is my boss." My father deflated. The skepticism remained, but the anger drained away. "And the mortgage. The bank called this morning. They said the balance was 0. "Oh, a wedding gift," Sterling said simply. "I take care of my family. Mr. Hardwick and Eloise is my family now." My mother started crying again, this time tears of relief. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Then it buzzed again, and again, a rapid-fire staccato that made my stomach drop. I pulled it out. Liam. He had posted a new video, a thread on social media. "The truth about Eloise." The caption read. I clicked play. Liam was sitting in a hotel room in Bali, looking disheveled and drunk. "You guys do not get it," he slurred into the camera. "She played me. She was sleeping with Vance the whole time. That is why she was so distant. That is why she was always working late at the office. I left because I found out. I am the victim here. She cuckolded me with a billionaire." My blood ran cold. He was rewriting history. He was turning his abandonment into a righteous escape. The comments were already flooding in. Gold digger, cheater, poor Liam. "He is spinning it," I whispered, showing the screen to Sterling. "He is saying I cheated on him with you." My father's face turned purple. That lying little Sterling took the phone from my hand. He watched the video once, his expression impassive. Then he handed the phone back to me. "Let him talk," Sterling said coldly. "He is digging his own grave. He just admitted to knowing about a relationship that didn't exist." Which contradicts his statement yesterday that you were boring. The internet detectives will tear his timeline apart within 2 hours. Sterling turned to me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, black metal card. The Centurion card, the kind that had no limit and could buy a small island. He pressed it into my hand. "Take your mother," Sterling said. "Go to the Magnificent Mile. Do not go to the outlet stores. Go to Chanel. Go to Dior. Go to the designers who refused to dress you for your wedding because you were nobody." He looked at me, his eyes hard and demanding. "Change everything. Eloise, throw away the cardigans. Burn the sensible shoes. From today, you are Mrs. Sterling Vance. You are the queen of this city. Stop dressing like a secretary and start dressing like the woman who owns the building." He kissed me on the forehead, a chaste, perfect performance for my parents, and walked toward the door. "I have a board meeting to crush." He threw over his shoulder. "Dinner is at 7. Do not be late." I stood there, the cold metal card heavy in my palm, feeling the shift in the atmosphere. The victim was dead. The mourning period was over. "Come on, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "We are going shopping." Walking into the lobby of Nexus Global had been my daily routine for 5 years. I would swipe my badge, nod to the security guard who never remembered my name, and squeeze into the crowded elevator with the other mid-level employees, hoping no one would spill coffee on my sensible beige cardigan. Today was different. Today, the revolving doors seemed to slow down for me. I was not wearing beige. I was wearing a structural black Dior suit that cost more than my first car, tailored to within an inch of its life to showcase a silhouette I had hidden for years. My heels, red-soled and lethal, clicked against the polished granite floor with a rhythm that sounded like a war drum. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," the head of security said, rushing out from behind his desk to swipe his master key for the private elevator bank. He was sweating. "Good morning, Earl," I said, offering him a smile that was practiced, polite, and distant. I did not squeeze into the crowded car. I stepped into the private executive lift, the one reserved for the C-suite gods. As the doors slid shut, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the mirrored panel. The woman looking back was not Eloise the victim. She was Eloise the survivor. When the doors opened on the 34th floor, the silence was immediate. This was the strategy deck, the brain of the company. It was also where the people who had laughed at me at the wedding worked. I walked down the corridor toward the corner office, my new office. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. I saw Sarah from HR, the one who had shown me Liam's video, duck behind her monitor. I saw the vice president of marketing, a man who had once asked me to fetch him a latte during a meeting, stand up and straighten his tie nervously. "Mrs. Vance," he stammered as I passed his cubicle, "we are so happy to have you back. I mean, in this new capacity." I stopped. I turned slowly on my heel to face him. I did not blink. "Thank you, David," I said, my voice cool and even. "I expect the quarterly engagement reports on my desk by noon. And David, do not use Comic Sans in the headers this time. It looks amateur." I left him gaping like a fish out of water and pushed open the double glass doors of my new office. It was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. A mahogany desk the size of a landing strip, and a white orchid on the coffee table. But there was no time to admire the view. I had a war to fight. Sterling had given me the title of Director of Strategy, and I intended to earn every cent of the salary. The PR team was already waiting for me in the conference room, looking like a group of frightened rabbits. "The situation with Liam is escalating," the junior crisis manager said, pulling up a graph on the screen. "He has posted 3 more videos. He is playing the honest artist crushed by corporate greed card. The engagement is high. People love an underdog." "He is not an underdog," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "He is a narcissist with a ring light, and we are not going to fight him in the mud." So we issue a denial, someone suggested. No, I said firmly. We issue nothing. Silence is our weapon. If we deny it, we validate him. If we argue, we look guilty. We are going to pivot. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard, uncapping a marker. We are launching the Vance Family Literacy Initiative next week, I announced, writing the words in bold letters. $2 million in grants for inner-city schools. We are going to flood the news cycle with images of Sterling and me reading to orphans and cutting ribbons. We are going to be so boringly benevolent that Liam's drama will look like noise. We are going to starve him of attention. The room was silent. Then, from the back of the room, a slow clap started. I turned. Sterling was leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest. He was wearing a charcoal suit that made his eyes look like stormy seas. He had been watching. You heard her, Sterling said to the room, his voice low but commanding. The director of strategy has spoken. Execute it. The team scrambled out, leaving us alone. Sterling walked over to the whiteboard, studying my handwriting. Silence and charity, he mused. Machiavellian disguised as Mother Teresa. I am impressed. I learned from the best, I replied, capping the marker. You taught me that the loudest person in the room is usually the weakest. Sterling looked at me then. It was a look I was beginning to see more often, a mix of professional respect and something else, something hotter, that lurked beneath the surface. You are terrifying when you work. Eloise, it suits you. Over the next 2 weeks, we were inseparable. We attended 3 charity galas and 2 gallery openings. I learned that Sterling Vance, the tyrant of the boardroom, was socially awkward. He hated small talk. He hated incompetence. He stood in corners, scowling at donors until they felt uncomfortable. My job was to humanize him. Smile, I whispered to him at the Art Institute gala, squeezing his arm as we approached the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company. Ask him about his sailboat. He loves his sailboat. Sterling grunted but obeyed. Nice boat, Bob. It is a yacht, Sterling. Bob beamed. Let me tell you about the new rigging. I smoothed over Sterling's sharp edges. I laughed at jokes that were not funny. I touched Sterling's arm, fixed his tie, and looked at him with adoring eyes whenever a camera was pointed our way. And slowly, the narrative changed. The media tyrant became the devoted husband. The stock price climbed another 8%. But the real test came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I returned to the penthouse to find the atmosphere tense. The air felt heavy, charged with static. Sterling was standing by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in his hand, looking more agitated than I had ever seen him. Sitting on the white sofa, looking like a queen on a throne, was a woman with silver hair coiffed into a perfect helmet and eyes that were colder than Sterling's. She was wearing a Chanel suit that was probably vintage and priceless. Eloise, Sterling said, his voice tight. My mother has arrived. From Zurich. Helena Vance, the Iron Lady of European media. She had not attended the wedding because she was indisposed, which in her language meant she disapproved. So, Helena said, not rising. Her gaze swept over me like a scanner at an airport security checkpoint, searching for contraband. This is the girl. Mother, Sterling warned. I am Eloise, I said, walking forward and extending my hand. I did not curtsy. I did not tremble. I was Mrs. Vance, and this was my home. It is a pleasure to meet you. Helena. She ignored my hand. A PR assistant, she drawled, her accent a vague mix of French and high-class British. My son marries a PR assistant in a shotgun wedding, and I am supposed to believe it is love. I smell a rat. My dear, I smell a gold digger who saw a moment of weakness and sank her claws in. Sterling stepped forward, his jaw clenched. That is enough. No, I said, stopping him with a glance. I turned back to Helena. I walked around the coffee table and sat in the armchair opposite her. Crossing my legs, I looked her dead in the eye. You are wrong, I said calmly. I did not sink my claws in. Your son pulled me up from the floor. And as for gold, I do not need his money. I have a brain that is currently increasing the market cap of this family's company by 12% this quarter. You can check the stock ticker if you do not believe me." Helena blinked. She was not used to being spoken to. She was used to being obeyed. "I am not here to steal your son's fortune," I continued, leaning forward. "I am here to protect it, and right now, the best protection he has is me. So you can either accept me and have a daughter-in-law who is as formidable as you are, or you can keep insulting me and watch from the sidelines. Your choice." The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Sterling looked ready to intervene, his body tense. Then, the corner of Helena's mouth twitched. A dry, rasping sound emerged from her throat. She was laughing. "Formidable," Helena murmured. "Yes, I see it. You have the eyes of a killer. My dear, good. Sterling needs a killer. He is too sentimental deep down." She reached out and took a grape from the fruit bowl. "You may stay." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Sterling looked at me with wide eyes. I had just tamed the dragon's mother, but the peace was short-lived. 2 nights later, at a cocktail reception for the Association of Broadcasters, the facade cracked in a way I did not expect. I was talking to Julian Thorne, a young, charismatic venture capitalist who had just invested heavily in our streaming platform. Julian was handsome in a rugged, approachable way, the opposite of Sterling's polished perfection. "You are wasted on the operational side, Eloise," Julian said, leaning in a little too close, his hand lingering on my elbow. "You have a face for the screen. Have you ever considered hosting I Could Make a Few Calls?" He was flirting. It was harmless. Professional flirting. The kind that happens at every mixer. I laughed, stepping back slightly to create space. "I prefer being behind the camera, Julian. Less pressure." "A shame," Julian smiled. Stepping into the space I had just vacated, he reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "You really are captivating." Suddenly, a hand clamped onto my waist. It was heavy, hot, and possessive. Sterling appeared out of nowhere. He did not look at me. He looked at Julian, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Julian," Sterling said. His voice was a low growl. "I believe my wife's contract is exclusive, in every sense of the word." Julian paled. He pulled his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. "Sterling, of course, I was just complimenting her strategy." "Compliment her from a distance," Sterling said. 3 feet seems appropriate." He pulled me against his side, his grip tightening until it bordered on painful. Then, in front of the vice president of sales and 3 board members. Sterling turned his head and buried his face in the crook of my neck. He kissed the sensitive skin right below my ear. A lingering, open-mouthed kiss that was shocking in its intimacy. It was not for the cameras. There were no cameras in this corner. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked up at him as he pulled back. His pupils were blown wide. He looked angry, but underneath the anger was a hunger that terrified and thrilled me. "You are mine," he whispered against my hair, too low for anyone else to hear. "Remember the contract, Eloise. No one else touches you." "It was just business," I whispered back, my voice trembling. "I do not care," Sterling snapped. He grabbed my hand and dragged me toward the exit. "We are leaving, in the car." He did not speak. He just held my hand, his thumb rubbing over the knuckles of the fake wedding ring, over and over, as if checking it was still there, while we were winning the war in Chicago. Liam was losing his battle in Bali. Sterling's resources were not an exaggeration. Within a week of my takeover, 3 of Liam's major sponsors dropped him, citing morals clauses in their contracts. His YouTube channel was demonetized due to suspicious bot activity, a little gift from Nexus Global's IT department. I saw the photos on a tabloid site the next morning. Liam, sitting on his suitcase at the airport, looking haggard and unshaven. He was flying economy. He was coming back to Chicago. "He is broke," Sterling said. tossing the tablet onto the breakfast table. And he is desperate. That makes him dangerous. I can handle him, I said, buttering my toast. He is just a boy who lost his toy. Do not underestimate a cornered rat, Sterling warned. I went to the office feeling invincible. The Vance Family Literacy Initiative was trending on Twitter. My team respected me. My mother-in-law tolerated me. My husband well. My husband was complicated. I walked into my office, humming a tune. There was a package on my desk. It was not from a client. It was not a fruit basket. It was a long, narrow box wrapped in black paper. I frowned. I had not ordered anything. I reached for the card. There was no return address. I untied the ribbon and opened the lid. Inside lay a dozen roses. But they were not red. They had been dyed a deep, inky black. They looked dead, yet preserved, like a funeral arrangement. Nestled among the thorns was a small white envelope. My hands shook slightly as I opened it. The handwriting was jagged, familiar. It was the same handwriting that used to leave sticky notes on my fridge saying, "Buy milk or I love you." I read the note. "You look good in his diamonds. Cinderella. But glass slippers shatter. The game is not over yet." A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept through the room. Liam was back, and he wasn't just sad anymore. He was hunting. The glass walls of the Vance Tower penthouse, once a symbol of my imprisonment, had begun to feel strangely like a sanctuary. It had been 3 weeks since the black roses arrived, and in that time, the sharp lines of our contract had started to blur into the softer edges of a shared life. We had developed a routine, a dangerous domestic rhythm that felt too real to be fake. It started with coffee. I discovered that Sterling, the man who moved markets with a single tweet, could not function without a specific blend of Ethiopian roast brewed at exactly 200 degrees. I was usually the first one up, driven by the anxiety that Liam's threat had planted in my chest. I would be in the kitchen, wrapped in my silk robe, waiting for the machine to hiss. When Sterling would emerge, he was different in the mornings. The armor of the 3-piece suit was gone. He wore gray sweatpants and a worn t-shirt that clung to his chest. His hair was messy, falling over his forehead in a way that made him look 10 years younger. We would stand by the kitchen island, drinking coffee in a companionable silence that was heavier and more intimate than any conversation we had in public. "You are reading the Nikkei index," he noted one Tuesday morning, leaning over my shoulder to look at my tablet. His chest brushed against my back, sending a warm shiver down my spine. "If we are going to expand the streaming service to Asia in the 3rd quarter, I need to know the market," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Smart," he murmured, taking a sip of his coffee. "Most people just look at the pictures." He didn't move away. He stayed there, existing in my personal space, smelling of soap and sleep. It was these moments, the passing of the salt at dinner, the way he would absent-mindedly rub his thumb over my knuckles when we watched old movies late at night, that terrified me. I was forgetting to act. I was forgetting that I was supposed to be guarding my heart. But the true shift happened in the dead of night. It was 3 a.m. when I heard it, a sound of pure, unadulterated distress coming from the master bedroom. I had been told never to enter that room, but the sound was guttural, a cry of someone fighting a losing battle. I pushed open the heavy oak door. The room was dark, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through the sheer curtains. Sterling was thrashing on the bed, the sheets tangled around his legs. "No," he moaned, his voice cracking. "Stop. Do not, please." The media tyrant was begging. I did not think. I rushed to the side of the bed and sat down. Reaching out to grab his shoulders, he was soaked in sweat, his skin burning hot. "Sterling," I whispered urgently. "Sterling, wake up. It is a dream," he gasped, his eyes flying open. For a second, he did not see me. He saw whatever demon was chasing him. He grabbed my wrist, his grip bruising. "Eloise," he rasped, his chest heaving. "I am here," I said softly. I did not pull away. I used my other hand to brush the damp hair off his forehead. "You were having a nightmare." He released my wrist and sat up, burying his face in his hands. The vulnerability radiating off him was palpable. "I am sorry. I did not mean to wake you." "Do not apologize," I said. "Do you want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "Old ghosts. Memories of a house that was too big and parents who were never there." He looked at me then, his eyes adjusting to the dark. I was wearing only a thin nightgown. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. It was a tentative, questioning touch. "Stay," he asked. It was a single word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 pleas. I climbed into the bed. We did not touch. I lay on top of the duvet, and he lay under it, but the distance between us was gone. I watched him fall back asleep, his breathing syncing with mine, and I realized with a jolt of terror that I was no longer afraid of him. I was afraid for him. 2 days later, I came home to find a thick envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it. Sterling was nowhere to be seen. I opened it. Inside was a legal deed. I scanned the document, my hands starting to tremble. It was the deed to 42 Maplewood Drive, my grandmother's house, the house I had sold 2 years ago to pay off the debts Liam had racked up with his failed crypto venture. I had cried for weeks after signing those papers. I turned around to find Sterling standing in the doorway of his study, watching me. "How?" I choked out. "The owners said they would never sell." "Everyone sells for the right price," Sterling said simply. "I offered them double the market value and paid for their moving costs to Florida. It is yours. Eloise, put it in your name. Do whatever you want with it." "Why?" I asked, tears spilling over. "This wasn't in the contract." Sterling walked over to me. He reached out and wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Because you talk about that porch swing in your sleep," he said softly. "And because I hate seeing you mourn things that can be fixed." I wanted to kiss him then. I wanted to throw my arms around his neck and tell him that he was the most incredible man I had ever met. But before I could move, his phone buzzed. "Pack a bag," he said, his voice shifting back to business mode, though his eyes remained soft. "We are going to Paris. The Fashion Week Gala is in 2 days, and the French investors need to see the happy couple. Paris, the city of lights, the city of lovers." We flew on the corporate jet. The luxury was becoming normal to me, which was a dangerous sign, but nothing prepared me for the hotel. We checked into the master suite at the Ritz. It was opulent, dripping with gold leaf and velvet, and it had 1 bed. "My assistant," Sterling sighed, looking at the king-sized bed that dominated the room. "She is very enthusiastic about the narrative." "I can sleep on the sofa," I offered, though the thought of another night beside him made my pulse race. "Do not be ridiculous," Sterling said, taking off his jacket. "The bed is the size of a landing strip. We are adults. Eloise." That evening, after a grueling dinner with 3 French media tycoons who spent the entire meal staring at my chest, we decided to walk back to the hotel along the Seine. The air was crisp, smelling of rain and roasted chestnuts. The Eiffel Tower was glittering in the distance, a beacon of romance that felt like it was mocking us. Sterling stopped on the Pont Alexandre, the 3rd bridge. He leaned against the stone railing, looking down at the dark water. "I lied," he said suddenly. I froze. "About what?" "About the beta test," he said. "About Liam being a distraction. But I also lied when I told you I chose you just because you looked me in the eye." He turned to face me. The street lamp cast shadows across his sharp cheekbones. "I noticed you on your first day at Nexus," Sterling confessed. "You were wearing a blue scarf. You held the elevator for an intern who dropped a stack of files. You were the only person who didn't sigh or roll their eyes. You helped him pick them up." I stared at him, stunned. "You remember that?" "That was 5 years ago." "I see everything. Eloise," Sterling said, his voice intense. "I watched you fix problems that weren't yours to fix. I watched you stay late to rewrite press releases that your incompetent manager butchered. I wanted to promote you a dozen times, but I have a rule. No relationships with employees. And I knew if I brought you into my orbit, I wouldn't be able to keep it professional. He took a step closer. When I saw you on that altar, looking like your world had ended, the rule didn't matter anymore. I didn't step in to save the company's image. I stepped in because the thought of anyone else hurting you made me want to burn the city down. My heart stopped. He was admitting it. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a deal. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him that I had felt that pull too, that the fear I had felt for 5 years was just attraction in disguise. But my phone rang. It was a jarring, ugly sound in the perfection of the Paris night. I looked at the screen. Dad. I have to take this, I whispered apologetically. Sterling nodded, stepping back to give me privacy, lighting a cigarette, a habit I didn't know he had. Hello, Dad. Eloise, my father's voice was shaking. Is it true? Is what true? Liam came to the house, my father said. He was crying. Eloise, he showed us documents, bank transfers. He says Sterling forced you to marry him. He says Sterling is using your name to wash money through offshore accounts in the Caymans. He says that if you try to leave, Sterling will frame you for embezzlement. I felt the blood drain from my face. Dad, that is insane. Liam is lying. Is he? My father asked, his voice low and fearful. The papers looked real. And think about it. Why would a billionaire marry you out of nowhere? Why would he pay off my mortgage the next day? It is hush money, isn't it? He is buying our silence. I looked at Sterling. He was standing 10 feet away, smoking, looking at the river. He looked like a dark prince, powerful, mysterious, capable of anything, money laundering. It was the kind of white-collar crime that men like Sterling were accused of all the time. And he had been so quick to create this marriage, so quick to give me money. Dad, stop, I said, my voice trembling. I will handle this. Do not talk to Liam again. I hung up. The seed of doubt had been planted. It was a tiny, poisonous thing, but it was there. Was the grandmother's house a gift, or was it a bribe? Was the confession he just made the truth, or was he manipulating me because he sensed I was pulling away? Everything all right? Sterling asked, tossing his cigarette into the water. Fine, I lied. Just my mom worrying about the weather. We walked back to the hotel in silence. The magic of the Seine had evaporated, replaced by a cold fog of suspicion, but the night was not over. Back in the room, the tension was suffocating. I went into the bathroom to change. I took off my dress and stood there in my lace underwear, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman in love, and I looked like a woman who was about to be destroyed. When I walked out, Sterling was waiting. He had taken off his shirt. His chest was defined, scarred slightly on the ribs, a detail I had never seen. He looked at me, and his eyes darkened. Eloise, he warned, his voice rough. I did not stop. I walked right up to him. I needed to know. I needed to feel if he was real or if he was the monster Liam described. I placed my hands on his bare chest. His heart was hammering against my palms. Make me forget, I whispered. Make me forget Liam. Make me forget the contract. Sterling let out a groan that sounded like he was in pain. He grabbed my waist, pulling me into him. His skin was fire. He kissed me. And this time, there was no audience. There were no cameras. It was raw, desperate hunger. He backed me up against the wall, his hands tangling in my hair, his mouth devouring mine. I wrapped my legs around his waist. I wanted him. I wanted to be his wife in every way that mattered. He carried me to the bed, laying me down on the silk sheets. He hovered over me, his eyes searching my face. He looked at me with such intensity that I felt like he was reading my soul. Then, he stopped. He froze, his hands trembling where they rested on the mattress on either side of my head. He closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. He pulled away. I cannot, he whispered. I sat up, feeling cold and rejected. Why am I not enough? Sterling stood up and walked to the window, keeping his back to me. You are too much, he said hoarsely. That is the problem. If I take you now, tonight, while you are still hurting, while you are still confused, I will never forgive myself. You are reacting. Eloise, you are trying to erase the past. I do not want to be the eraser. I want to be the future. He turned to look at me. When we do this, and we will, I want you to come to me because you love me, not because you hate him, and not because you feel you owe me for a house. I pulled the sheet up to cover myself, tears stinging my eyes. He was right, and in his refusal, he proved Liam wrong. A man who was using me for money laundering would not care about my emotional state. A man who was using me would have taken what was offered. Sterling Vance was a decent man hiding in a villain's suit. I think, I whispered to the empty room as he walked into the bathroom and locked the door, that I already do. We flew back to Chicago the next morning. The silence on the plane was different now. It was not awkward. It was charged with a new understanding. We were on the precipice of something real. But as the Chicago skyline came into view, gray and imposing under a storm front, I knew the peace was over. Liam had gone to my parents. He had escalated the war. He wasn't just attacking my reputation anymore. He was attacking my family's trust. I looked at Sterling, who was reading a briefing on his tablet. Sterling, I said. He looked up. Liam spoke to my father, I admitted. He told him you are laundering money. He told him I am a hostage. Sterling's expression did not change, but his knuckles turned white as he gripped the tablet. Did he? Yes, I said. And I am going to help you destroy him. Sterling smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. Welcome home, Mrs. Vance, he said. Let the games begin. The storm did not hit us with the violence of a thunderclap. It arrived with the insidious quiet of a digital virus. It was Monday morning. 3 days after our return from Paris, I was in my office, reviewing the launch strategy for the literacy initiative, feeling a sense of calm I had not known in years. Sterling was down the hall in a budget meeting. The air in the Nexus Global Tower felt rarefied, untouchable. We were the power couple of the moment. We were invincible. Then, my computer screen flickered. A notification popped up from the internal media monitoring system. It was flagged with the highest priority level. Code read, reputational threat imminent. I clicked the link. It was an audio file uploaded to a burner account on a streaming platform, but it had already been shared 5,000 times in 10 minutes. The title was simple, The Price of a Bride. I pressed play. My own voice filled the room. It was clear, undeniable, and damning. I am doing this for the money. The debts will be gone. I do not care about love. I just need the cash to save the house. Sterling is just a means to an end. I sat frozen, my hand hovering over the mouse. I recognized the words, but they were wrong. They were disjointed. The first sentence was from a conversation I had with my father about selling my grandmother's house 3 years ago. The second sentence was something I had said to a mortgage broker. The mention of Sterling was spliced in from a completely different context. Probably a recording of me giving a press statement. It was a Frankenbite, a crude, malicious edit designed to paint me as the gold digger Helena Vance had accused me of being. But the world did not know it was an edit. Within an hour, the narrative we had carefully constructed crumbled. The hashtag #FireEloise began trending. The stock market, which reacted to sentiment faster than logic, took a nosedive. Nexus Global shares dropped 4% by lunch. That was hundreds of millions of dollars in market capitalization, evaporated into thin air. The phone on my desk rang. It was Earl, the head of security. Mrs. Vance? His voice was grim. The board of directors has called an emergency session. They are demanding your presence. And ma'am, do not check your social media. I walked into the boardroom feeling like Joan of Arc approaching the pyre. The long mahogany table was populated by 12 men and women who controlled the fate of the company. They looked at me with open hostility. Sterling sat at the head of the table. He was not looking at them. He was looking at the window. His jaw set so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. "This is a disaster," pronounced George Holloway, the chairman of the board, throwing a stack of printouts onto the table. "The advertisers are pulling out. The stock is bleeding. The public feels betrayed. They thought they were watching a fairy tale, and now they think they are watching a heist." "It is a fake," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. "That audio is doctored. I never said those things in that order." "It does not matter if it is fake," Holloway shouted, slamming his hand down. "Perception is reality. Mrs. Vance, you of all people should know that. You are the PR director. You are toxic. We cannot close the Henderson deal with this hanging over us." He turned to Sterling. "Sterling, you need to cut the limb to save the body. We have drafted a separation agreement. Announce that you were deceived. Announce an annulment. Fire her." Holloway slid a folder across the polished wood toward Sterling. It contained the papers that would end my marriage and my career. The room held its breath. I looked at Sterling. He was staring at the folder. He had married me to secure the Henderson deal. If I was now the obstacle to that deal, the logical, ruthless business decision was to discard me. I was a liability. I took a step forward. I had to make this easier for him. I had to be the one to say it. "Sterling," I said softly, "do it. Sign the papers. I will issue a statement taking full responsibility. I will say, I duped you. The company matters more than my reputation." It was the most painful thing I had ever said, after Paris, after the way he had held me. Offering him an out felt like tearing out my own heart. Sterling slowly turned his gaze from the folder to me. His eyes were dark, unreadable pools. He looked at Holloway. He looked at the nervous board members. Then he looked back at me, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a terrifyingly cold smile. He reached out and picked up the folder. "You think," Sterling said, his voice quiet but echoing in the silent room, "that you can dictate the terms of my marriage? It is business, Sterling," Holloway sputtered. "She is a weakness." Sterling stood up. He held the folder in both hands. With a violent, deliberate motion, he tore the thick stack of papers in half. The sound of ripping paper was like a gunshot. He tore them again and again, until the legal exit strategy was nothing but confetti raining down onto the mahogany table. "My wife," Sterling snarled, leaning over the table, looking like a wolf ready to tear out a throat, "is not a weakness. She is my strength. She is the only person in this room with the courage to tell the truth. If you want her gone, you will have to fire me first. And since I own 51% of the voting shares, I wish you good luck with that." He turned to me. "Fix this. Eloise, I am giving you the floor." My heart soared. He had chosen me. He had burned the bridge of retreat. I nodded. The strategist in me took over. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "I am not going to issue a denial," I told the stunned board. "I am going to hold a press conference, live, in the atrium, in 20 minutes. To say what?" Holloway asked, pale. "To tell the story," I said. "The real one." 20 minutes later, I stood at a podium in the soaring glass atrium of Vance Tower. 100 reporters were crammed behind the velvet ropes. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. The world was watching. Sterling stood behind me, to my right. He was my shadow, my wall. I did not use a script. I did not use the teleprompter. I looked directly into the camera lens, stripping away the polish, the makeup, the facade of the billionaire's wife. "You have all heard the recording," I began. My voice was low, forcing them to lean in. "You heard a woman talking about money. You heard a woman talking about debts, and you assumed that woman was greedy." I paused. That recording is manipulated, but the fear in that voice, that was real. I took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I fell in love with a man who promised me the world. Instead, he gave me 5 years of financial abuse. He took out credit cards in my name. He gambled away my savings. He forced me to sell my grandmother's house, the only thing I had left of her, to pay for his failed business ventures. When you heard me say, I need the cash to save the house, I wasn't talking about a mansion. I was talking about a 2-bedroom cottage in the suburbs that I was trying to save from foreclosure because my fiancé had drained my bank account dry. A hush fell over the crowd. The reporters stopped shouting questions. Liam did not leave me because I was boring, I continued, my voice gaining strength. He left me because he had bled me dry and found a new target, and when Sterling Vance stepped in, he didn't just save a bride from embarrassment, he saved a woman who was drowning. Yes, he paid off my debts. Yes, he gave me security, but he never asked for my soul in return. He asked for my partnership. The audio you heard is the weapon of a desperate abuser trying to control his victim one last time. I am not that victim anymore. I looked back at Sterling. He was looking at me with an expression of such fierce pride that it made my knees weak. I am Eloise Vance, I concluded, and I am done being afraid. I stepped back. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Then, a reporter from the Tribune started clapping. Then another. It wasn't the polite applause of a gala. It was the applause of respect. We had won. I could feel it. The narrative had flipped. I wasn't a gold digger. I was a survivor. But as we turned to leave the podium, a voice cut through the applause like a knife. Tell them the rest, Sterling. It was Liam. He had bypassed security. He was standing on the upper balcony of the atrium, looking disheveled, manic, and dangerous. He was holding a megaphone. Tell her why you really married her, Liam screamed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. Tell her who my father was. Sterling froze. His hand, which had been on the small of my back, went rigid. I looked up at Liam, then back at Sterling. What is he talking about? Do not listen to him, Sterling said, his voice tight. Security, get him. My name isn't just Liam, the man on the balcony shouted, backing away as guards approached him. My legal name is Liam Miller. My father was Marcus Miller. Does that name ring a bell? Eloise Miller, Media. The name triggered a memory from my business school case studies. Miller Media, a mid-sized publishing giant that had been hostilely taken over and dismantled 10 years ago. The CEO had committed suicide shortly after the acquisition. Sterling Vance destroyed my father, Liam yelled, his eyes wild. He raided our company. He drove my dad to his grave, and when he saw me, when he realized who I was, he didn't just want to beat me in business. He wanted to take everything. He stole my company, and now he has stolen my fiancé as a trophy. He didn't marry you because he loved you, Eloise. He married you to finish burying the Miller family. The security guards tackled Liam, dragging him away, but his words hung in the air like toxic smoke. He drove my dad to his grave. I turned to Sterling. The cameras were zooming in on our faces, capturing every micro-expression. Sterling, I whispered, is it true? Is Liam Marcus Miller's son? Sterling looked at me. His face was a mask of stone. He did not look surprised. He did not look confused. He looked guilty. It is complicated, Sterling said. Did you know? I asked, my voice trembling. When you stood up at that altar, did you know he was Marcus Miller's son? Sterling hesitated. That hesitation was a death sentence. Yes, he said. The world stopped spinning. The atrium, the reporters, the flashing lights, it all faded into a gray blur. He knew. The pieces clicked into place. The sudden intervention, the focus on destroying Liam, the beta test comment. It wasn't about saving me. It wasn't even about the Henderson deal. It was a vendetta. I was just a pawn in a decade-long war between two men. And did you, I choked on the words, did you take over his father's company? Did you drive him to suicide? I acquired a failing asset, Sterling said, his voice hardening, retreating into corporate speak. Marcus was incompetent. He was ruining the company. I saved the jobs. I did what was necessary. You capitalized on a dying man, I whispered. And you used me to twist the knife in his son. Eloise, listen to me, Sterling said, reaching for my arm. That is not why I married you. Not entirely. Not entirely. I recoiled from his touch as if he had burned me. So it was part of it. Even 5%. You looked at me on that altar and you saw a weapon to hurt Liam. Sterling did not answer. He could not lie to me. And the truth was written in his silence. I felt something break inside me. It wasn't my heart that had been broken by Liam. It was my trust. I had believed Sterling was different. I had believed he was my protector, but he was just another man playing a game where I was the collateral damage. I cannot do this, I said. My voice was hollow. Eloise, do not do this here, Sterling hissed, glancing at the cameras. We will talk at home. I do not have a home, I said. The penthouse is yours. The house on Maplewood Drive is yours. You bought it. I have nothing. I turned my back on him. Eloise, Sterling called out. There was panic in his voice, a sound I had never heard before. I did not look back. I walked through the crowd of reporters, who parted like the Red Sea. Sensing the devastation radiating off me, I walked out of the atrium, out of the revolving doors, and into the cold Chicago wind. I hailed a taxi. Where to? The driver asked. Lincoln Park, I said, giving him my parents' address. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window. My phone was buzzing incessantly in my pocket. Sterling. I reached into my pocket, took out the phone, and turned it off. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the silence of a tomb. I had won the public battle, but I had lost the war. I was alone again, and this time, there was no billionaire in a midnight blue tuxedo coming to save me. The ceiling of my childhood bedroom was covered in glow-in-the-dark stars that I had stuck there when I was 12. They were peeling now, yellowed with age, shedding a faint, pathetic light that did nothing to illuminate the darkness I felt inside. I had been back at my parents' house in Lincoln Park for 4 days. 4 days of sleeping in a twin bed that felt too small. 4 days of my mother hovering in the doorway with trays of tea and toast, looking at me with eyes full of pity that made me want to scream. The house smelled of lavender laundry detergent and pot roast, the sense of safety, of a life before contracts and billionaires. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt suffocating. The silence here was different. It was empty. It lacked the electric hum of the city that permeated the penthouse. It lacked the scent of sandalwood and scotch. It lacked him. Sterling had not called. He had not texted. He had not stormed the front door demanding I return. As the hero in a romance novel might have done, he was respecting the boundary I had drawn, and I hated him for it. I wanted him to fight for me, even though I was the one who had walked away, but he was not entirely absent. On the second morning, a courier arrived. He did not bring flowers or jewelry. He brought a brown paper bag from the small, artisanal roastery in the West Loop that we had discovered 3 weeks ago. Inside was a pound of the Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee beans I loved. There was no card. Just a sticky note attached to the bag with a single word written in his sharp, architectural handwriting warning. On the third day, a book arrived. It was a first edition of The Art of War, but not the one for show. It was a battered copy, dog-eared and annotated in the margins. It was his personal copy. The note this time said, "Strategy." He was speaking to me in code. He was telling me he was thinking of me, that he remembered the small details, and that he respected my need to think. He was giving me space, but he was keeping a tether attached. I spent my days in the local library, not because I needed books, but because I needed to be away from my parents' worried whispers. I needed the truth. Liam's accusation on the balcony had been a grenade, but now that the smoke had cleared, I needed to examine the shrapnel. He drove my dad to his grave. I sat at a secluded terminal in the back of the library and logged into the archives of the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. I typed in the search terms, Marcus Miller, Miller Media, acquisition, Sterling Vance. The articles from 10 years ago painted a grim picture. Miller Media had indeed collapsed. Marcus Miller had indeed taken his own life, but as I dug deeper, reading the SEC filings and the post-mortem audit reports that had been buried in the back pages, a different narrative emerged. Marcus Miller had not been a victim. He had been a thief. According to the audit, Miller had been embezzling from the employee pension fund for 5 years to cover his gambling debts and shore up failing stock prices. The company was not just failing, it was a hollow shell. When Sterling Vance acquired it, he did not raid a healthy kingdom. He bought a burning building. I read the restructuring report signed by Sterling. He had liquidated the executive assets, the private jets, the vacation homes to replenish the pension fund. He had saved 3,000 jobs by absorbing the staff into Nexus Global. He had fired Marcus Miller, yes, but he had refused to press criminal charges publicly to spare the family the humiliation. Sterling had protected Liam's family name at the expense of his own reputation. He had let the world call him a vulture so that a teenage boy would not have to know his father was a criminal. I sat back in the wooden chair. The glow of the monitor stinging my tired eyes. I felt sick. I had accused him of using me to twist the knife, but he had been shielding me from the truth the entire time. He hadn't told me because he didn't want to destroy my image of Liam's background, no. He didn't tell me because Sterling Vance never explained himself. He did the hard thing, took the heat, and moved on. I walked home through the gray slush of the Chicago winter, my heart heavy with guilt. I had left the only man who had ever truly protected me. When I got back to the house, there was a black sedan parked in the driveway. It wasn't Sterling's, it was a rental. Liam was sitting on the front porch swing, my grandmother's swing, talking to my mother. Rage, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. How dare he? Eloise, Liam stood up as I approached. He was wearing a wool coat that looked expensive, likely bought with the last of his credit. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed. He was playing the part of the grieving ex-fiancé to perfection. "What are you doing here, Liam?" I asked, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "I came to check on you," he said, walking down to meet me. He reached out to touch my arm. I forced myself not to flinch. "I saw the news. You left him. I knew you would. I knew you would see through his monster mask eventually." My mother stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. "I will just make some tea," she murmured, retreating into the house to give us privacy. "He is a monster. Liam," I lied, my voice trembling with feigned vulnerability. I let my shoulders slump. "You were right. He is cold. He manipulated everything." Liam's eyes lit up. It was a subtle shift, a predatory gleam that a week ago I would have missed. But I was not the same woman anymore. I was a strategist. "I am so sorry I didn't tell you sooner," Liam said, stepping closer, invading my space. "I was trying to protect you. That is why I had to leave for Bali. I had to find a way to build my own empire so I could come back and save you from him. But now we can finish him together." "Finish him?" I asked, widening my eyes. "How he is untouchable, Liam. He owns the city." Liam laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Nobody is untouchable. I have friends, powerful friends. I have been talking to the CEO of Goliath Media. They are terrified of the Henderson merger. If that deal goes through, Vance becomes a monopoly." He lowered his voice, leaning in conspiratorially. "I gave them the schematics for Nexus Global's new server architecture. The one you told me about last month, remember?" My stomach dropped. I remembered. I had vented to him about the server migration headaches one night over wine, thinking I was talking to my partner, not a corporate spy. "You gave them trade secrets," I whispered. "I sold them insurance," Liam corrected. "Goliath is going to launch a cyber attack on the Nexus servers on the night of the Winter Solstice Gala. They will crash the platform, the stock will tank, the Henderson deal will fall apart, and Sterling Vance will be ruined." He grabbed my hands. His palms were sweaty. "And then, when he is down, we will rise, you and me. We can sell the rest of what you know. We can be rich, real rich, not just allowance rich." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had planned to marry. I saw the greed, the pettiness, the absolute lack of moral compass. He wasn't doing this for justice. He wasn't doing this for his father. He was doing this because he was a small man who wanted to break something big. I slowly pulled my hands away. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was dark, but the voice memo app was running in the background. "You are right, Liam," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Nobody is untouchable." I stopped the recording and hit save. "What are you doing?" Liam frowned, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "I am saving my husband," I said, "and I am burying you." Liam lunged for the phone. "Give me that." I stepped back, raising the phone. "It is already uploaded to the cloud. Liam, one step closer, and I send this to the FBI right now. This is corporate espionage. This is conspiracy to commit cyberterrorism. You are not going to be rich. You are going to prison." Liam froze. The color drained from his face. He looked at the house, then at me, then at the street. He realized he had walked into a trap. You bitch," he spat. "He brainwashed you." "No," I said calmly. "He just treated me like an equal. Get off my property. If I see you again, I won't call the police. I will call Sterling." Liam scrambled backward, stumbling over his own feet. He ran to his rental car, peeling out of the driveway as if the devil himself were chasing him. I watched him go. I felt no satisfaction, only a profound exhaustion. And underneath the exhaustion, a burning, undeniable need. I needed to go home. I went inside and packed my bag. My mother tried to stop me, asking where I was going. "I am going to my husband," I told her. "I made a mistake. Mom, a big one." I called a car service. The ride to downtown Chicago took 40 minutes. 40 minutes to think about every cold look Sterling had given me that was actually restraint. Every harsh word that was actually advice. Every silence was actually protection. He was preparing a legal feast for Liam, I knew that now. While I was crying in my childhood bed, he was probably meeting with forensic accountants, tracking down every cent Liam had hidden, every tax law he had violated. He was doing the dirty work so I wouldn't have to. I swiped my key card at the private elevator. My hand was shaking. What if he didn't want me back? What if I had broken the one thing he valued, loyalty? The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, the apartment was dark. The city lights outside were shrouded in fog, casting long, gloomy shadows across the marble floor. "Sterling," I called out softly. There was no answer. I walked into the living room. It was empty. The kitchen was pristine, untouched. I moved toward the bedroom. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. Sterling was there. He was sitting in a wingback chair facing the window, but he wasn't looking at the view. The room was pitch black, save for the ambient light from the street below. He was wearing his dress shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the side table. In his hands, he held something white and frothy. It was my veil, the torn veil from the wedding day. He was running his fingers over the lace, over and over again, with a gentleness that broke my heart. He looked utterly alone. He looked like a king who had lost his kingdom and realized the crown was just heavy metal. He didn't hear me enter. The thick carpet muffled my footsteps. I stood there for a moment, watching him mourn a marriage that was supposed to be fake. And in that moment, any lingering doubt vanished. This wasn't a man who had used me. This was a man who was grieving me. "Sterling," I whispered. He went still. His hand froze on the lace. He did not turn around immediately, as if he were afraid I was a hallucination born of the scotch and the silence. Slowly, he turned his head. When his eyes met mine, the raw pain in them was so intense it almost knocked the wind out of me. He looked at me, then down at the veil in his hands, then back at me. "You came back," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding on glass. "I learned the truth," I said, taking a step into the room. "About Marcus Miller. about the pension fund, about everything. Sterling let out a bitter laugh and dropped the veil onto the floor. Then you know I am a villain, just a different kind than the one Liam painted. No, I said, walking toward him until I was standing between his knees. I know you are the man who saved 3,000 families, and I know you are the man who let me hate him rather than burden me with the past. I reached out and cupped his face. His skin was cool. He leaned into my touch instantly, his eyes closing, a shudder running through his body. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. Because I wanted you to look at me and see me. Sterling whispered, opening his eyes. Not a savior, not a martyr, just me. And when you left, I thought I had finally shown you the real me, and it was too ugly for you. You are not ugly, I said, my thumb tracing his cheekbone. You are just an idiot who thinks he has to carry the world on his shoulders. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the table next to the whiskey. I have a gift for you, I said. A recording. Liam confessed a conspiracy with Goliath Media. He gave them the server schematics. Sterling's eyes snapped open, the sharpness returning instantly. He did what? He gave me the evidence. I said, We have him. Sterling. He is done. Sterling looked at the phone, then up at me. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. He reached up and wrapped his hands around my waist, pulling me down onto his lap. You really are dangerous, he murmured, burying his face in my neck. My God, Eloise. You are magnificent. I held him, feeling the tension leave his body, replaced by a new, vibrant energy. The storm outside was still raging, but inside, the silence was finally gone. I missed you, I whispered into his hair. I haven't slept in 4 days, he admitted against my skin. We sat there in the dark, plotting the demise of our enemies, and for the first time, I knew exactly who the groom was, and I knew I would burn the world down for him, just as he would for me. The recording on the phone stopped playing, leaving the penthouse in a silence that felt completely different from the oppressive quiet of the last few days. This silence was heavy. Yes, but it was the heaviness of a dam breaking, the pressure finally releasing. Sterling sat motionless in the wingback chair, the phone resting on his knee. He did not look at the device, he looked at me. His eyes, usually so guarded, so adept at scanning contracts for loopholes, were wide open and unguarded. There was a moisture in them that caught the dim light from the street lamps below. You went back to him, Sterling said, his voice rough with an emotion I had never heard him express. You went back to the man who broke you, and you baited him into a federal crime, for me. I did not do it for the company, I whispered, kneeling beside his chair, my hands resting on his knees. I did it for my husband. Sterling let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. He reached down and pulled me up, not into a polite embrace, but hauling me into his lap with a desperation that told me everything I needed to know. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his arms wrapping around me like bands of iron. I could feel the tension leaving his body, the rigid posture of the corporate titan melting into the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting a lonely war for too long. I was terrified, Sterling confessed, his voice muffled against my skin. Not of the audit, not of the stock price. I have lost money before. I can make money again. I was terrified of losing you. He pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face. When Liam shouted that accusation that I drove his father to suicide, I froze. I saw the look in your eyes. Eloise, you looked at me like I was the monster the tabloids say I am. And I thought, this is it. She finally sees the darkness I have been trying to hide. I thought you would leave and never come back. I did leave, I reminded him gently. But I came back because I realized that a monster would not have saved 3,000 pensions. A monster would not have bought my grandmother's house just to see me smile. Sterling closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against mine. I wanted to be a hero for you, I wanted to be the knight in the shiny armor, not the ruthless operator who buys broken companies and buries broken men. I was afraid that if you knew the ugly truth of how I made my fortune, you would stop looking at me with that light in your eyes. I do not want a knight. Sterling, I said, running my fingers through the hair at the nape of his neck. Knights are for fairy tales. I want the man who stays up all night reading market reports to save jobs. I want the man who holds my hand when I'm having a panic attack. I want you. He kissed me then. It was not the theatrical kiss of the altar, nor the desperate, angry kiss of Paris. It was a kiss of surrender. It was slow, deep, and filled with a profound gratitude that tasted like salt and whiskey. No more contracts, Sterling whispered against my lips. No more timelines. No more acting. No more acting, I agreed. He stood up, lifting me effortlessly into his arms. He carried me to the bedroom, kicking the door shut behind us. The darkness of the room felt protective now, a cocoon for us to finally shed the layers of pretense we had been wearing for weeks. That night was the true beginning of our marriage. There were no cameras, no press releases, no strategic objectives. There was only skin against skin, the sound of ragged breathing, and the feeling of two lonely people finally finding their home in each other. When Sterling touched me, it was with a reverence that made me want to weep. He worshipped my body not as a trophy, but as a miracle. And when I held him, tracing the scars on his ribs that he had gotten from a childhood he never spoke about, I felt him finally let go of the weight of the world. We slept entangled, limbs woven together as if we were terrified that if we let go, the other would vanish. Morning arrived with a brilliance that seemed to mock the stormy gloom of the previous days. The sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows was blinding. I woke up to find Sterling already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching me sleep. He looked different. The hard lines around his mouth had softened. The shadow in his eyes was gone. "Good morning, Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Good morning," I smiled, stretching. "Is the world still burning?" "Probably," Sterling said, leaning down to kiss my nose. "But we have a fire extinguisher now." He rolled out of bed, not reaching for his suit, but grabbing a robe. "Coffee? Then war room. You are the strategist. I need orders." An hour later, we were at the kitchen island. The romantic atmosphere had shifted seamlessly into a high-octane partnership. I was no longer just the wife. I was the brain. I laid out the plan on the marble counter, using a stylus on my tablet to draw the schematic. "Liam thinks he has the codes to the new server architecture," I explained, tapping the screen. He handed them over to Goliath Media. "But he doesn't know that we migrated the core data to a cloud-based, decentralized system 2 days ago. The codes he has are for the decoy server." Sterling's eyes gleamed with appreciation. "So when Goliath launches their cyber attack, they will be attacking an empty fortress," I finished. "And the moment they ping the decoy server, we will have their IP addresses, we will have proof of the intrusion, we can trace it back to Goliath's headquarters. And we have Liam on tape facilitating the transaction," Sterling added, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "It is a double trap. We take down Liam for espionage, and we bury Goliath Media for corporate sabotage. 2 birds, 1 stone." "But we need to make it public," I said. "We need a stage." "The Winter Solstice Gala," Sterling said. "It is in 3 days. Everyone will be there. The press, the board, the Henderson family." "Perfect," I said. "But we need to close the loop on one thing first." "What is that?" "My parents," I said. "I left them yesterday without an explanation. They think I am a victim returning to her captor. We need to fix this. Sterling, properly." Sterling stiffened slightly, the old insecurity flickering. "Do you think they will ever forgive me for the lie?" "There is only one way to find out," I said. "Invite them to dinner, tonight." The dinner was held in the private dining room of the penthouse. I had ordered the chef to prepare comfort food, roast chicken, truffle mashed potatoes, and the specific vintage of Cabernet my father loved. When my parents arrived, they were wary. My father walked in with his chest puffed out, ready to defend his daughter. My mother looked around the penthouse with wide, nervous eyes. Sterling did not wait for them to speak. He did not offer them a drink to distract them. He walked straight up to my father and extended his hand. "Mr. Hardwick," Sterling said. His voice was humble, stripped of all its usual arrogance. "I owe you an apology, a profound one." My father hesitated, then took the hand, though his grip was stiff. "You certainly do, son. You dragged my daughter into a circus." "I did," Sterling admitted, looking him in the eye. "I treated Eloise like a business asset because that is all I understood. I thought I could control everything with contracts and money, but I was wrong. Your daughter is the most formidable, intelligent, and compassionate woman I have ever met. She saved me. Sir, in every way a man can be saved." Sterling turned to my mother. "I know I started this marriage with a lie, but I am asking for your permission to finish it with the truth. I love her. I do not just want to be her husband on paper. I want to be the man who takes care of her for the rest of her life." My mother's eyes filled with tears. She looked at me. "Eloise, I love him. Mom," I said, stepping to Sterling's side and taking his hand. "He is not who you think he is. He is better." My father looked at Sterling, then at me. He saw the way Sterling stood protective but deferential. He saw the way my hand rested comfortably in his. The tension in his shoulders finally dropped. "Well," my father grunted, reaching for the wine bottle, "if you hurt her again, Vance, I don't care how many billions you have. I have a baseball bat from 1998 in the garage." Sterling smiled, and it was genuine. "I would expect nothing less, sir." The dinner was a success. For the first time, we were a family. My father even laughed at one of Sterling's dry jokes about the stock market. By the time they left, the rift had healed. We were united, but the peace outside our walls was crumbling. The next morning, small leaks began to appear in the business blogs. Rumors of an investigation into Liam Miller. Nothing concrete, just whispers that Sterling had planted. He wanted Liam nervous. He wanted him desperate. And it worked. At 2 p.m, my office phone rang. It was a blocked number. "Hello? $5 million. Liam's voice hissed. He sounded manic, his breathing shallow. "Cash, unmarked, in a duffel bag." "Liam," I said, putting the call on speaker so Sterling could hear. "You are hallucinating." "I have the trigger," Liam screamed. "Goliath is ready to launch. I swear to God, Eloise, if I do not get $5 million by Friday night, I will give them the go-ahead. The Nexus servers will melt. The Henderson deal will die. Sterling will be the king of a pile of ash." Sterling signaled for me to keep him talking. He was tracing the call, though we already knew it was coming from a burner phone. $5 million is a lot of money, Liam," I said coolly. "How do I get it to you?" "The gala," Liam said. "I know you are hosting the winter solstice party at the Sterling Grand. I will be there. I have a backdoor invite from an old contact. Meet me in the VIP suite on the mezzanine level at 9 o'clock. Bring the money, or the servers burn." I looked at Sterling. He nodded once, his eyes cold and predatory. "Fine," I said. 9 o'clock. Do not be late." I hung up. "He took the bait," Sterling said, leaning back in his chair. "He is walking right into the spotlight." "He thinks he is going to win," I said, feeling a shiver of anticipation. "He thinks he is the hero of this story. He is about to find out he is just the villain of the week," Sterling replied. The day of the gala arrived with a flurry of activity. The Sterling Grand Hotel was transformed into a winter wonderland of white roses, crystal ice sculptures, and blue velvet. It was an event designed to project power, stability, and infinite wealth. I stood in the massive walk-in closet of the penthouse, staring at the rows of designer gowns Sterling had bought for me. There were soft pastels, innocent whites, elegant creams the colors of a traditional, submissive wife. Sterling walked in, buttoning his tuxedo shirt. He stopped when he saw me staring at the clothes. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Do you not like the selection?" "They are too safe," I said. "They are the colors of the woman who was abandoned at the altar. They are the colors of the victim." I walked past the row of whites and reached into the back. Where a garment bag had been hanging untouched, I unzipped it. It was red, a deep, blood-red silk that shimmered like liquid fire. It was structured, strapless, with a slit that ran up the thigh, a dress that demanded attention, a dress that declared war. "I want to wear this," I said, holding it up. Sterling looked at the dress, then at my eyes. A slow smile spread across his face. "Red," he mused. "The color of victory, the color of retribution," I corrected. "Wear it," Sterling said softly, coming up behind me and kissing my shoulder. "You look like a queen who is about to execute a traitor." I put on the dress. It fit like a second skin. I applied a lipstick that matched the silk perfectly. I put on the sapphire earrings Sterling had given me, the something blue, to match my something red. When we walked out of the penthouse to the waiting limousine, I did not feel fear. I felt a cold, exhilarating calm. I was no longer the girl crying on the church steps. I was Mrs. Sterling Vance, and tonight I was going to collect my debt. "Ready?" Sterling asked, as the car pulled up to the red carpet, where hundreds of flashbulbs were popping like fireworks. I took his hand, gripping it firmly. "Let's go finish this," I said. The ballroom of the Sterling Grand Hotel had been transformed into a winter cathedral of ice and velvet. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a prismatic light over the 600 guests who represented the absolute apex of Chicago society. There were senators, tech moguls, old money heiresses, and the hungry press corps corralled behind velvet ropes at the perimeter. The air smelled of expensive champagne, white roses, and the distinct, metallic scent of power. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, my hand resting on Sterling's arm. The red silk dress felt like liquid armor against my skin. It was a violent splash of color in a sea of safe black tuxedos and pastel gowns. I could feel the eyes of the room shifting toward us, a magnetic pull that silenced conversations mid-sentence. "Breathe," Sterling whispered, his voice low and steady. He looked devastating in a tuxedo that was cut sharp enough to draw blood. "Tonight, we are not just hosting a party. We are conducting an execution." "I am ready," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I meant it. My heart was not racing with fear. It was beating with the slow, heavy rhythm of a war drum. We descended the stairs. The flashbulbs erupted like a localized lightning storm. I smiled, a sharp, dangerous curve of the lips that I had learned from the man beside me. We moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting compliments, playing the role of the golden couple, but my eyes were scanning the room, hunting for the snake in the garden, and then I saw him. Liam stood near the champagne tower, looking terrifyingly confident. He was wearing a white dinner jacket, a choice that screamed for attention. On his arm was the woman from the airport photos. She was young, blonde, and looked uncomfortable in a dress that was too tight and too sparkly for an event of this caliber. Liam caught my eye. He did not look away. He raised his glass in a mocking toast, his smile stretching wide and predatory. He tapped the breast pocket of his jacket, signaling that he had the phone, the trigger, the leverage. He thought he was about to walk out of here with $5 million in cash. He thought he was the smartest man in the room. The clock struck 9. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, leaving only the spotlights focused on the stage at the far end of the room. A hush fell over the crowd as Sterling walked up to the podium. I stood to the side, in the shadows, watching. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling began, his voice amplified by the speakers, rich and commanding. "Thank you for joining us for the Winter Solstice Gala. Tonight is about the future. It is about transparency. It is about legacy. Transparency. A voice shouted from the floor. That is rich coming from a thief. The crowd gasped. Heads turned violently. Liam was marching toward the stage, dragging his date along with him. He looked manic, his eyes wide with adrenaline. He pushed past a waiter, sending a tray of flutes crashing to the floor. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the silent hall, a jarring recall of my wedding day. "Security," someone shouted. "Let him speak," Sterling commanded, holding up a hand. The security guards froze. Sterling looked down at Liam with a calmness that was almost inhuman. "Mr. Miller, you seem to have something to say." Liam climbed onto the stage. He stood next to Sterling, grabbing the microphone from the stand. He was sweating, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked out at the sea of faces, the very people he had wanted to impress his whole life. "You all think he is a savior," Liam yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Sterling. "You think Nexus Global is a fortress, but it is a house of cards, and I am the wind." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He held it up like a holy relic. "On this drive," Liam announced, his voice cracking with hysteria, "is proof that Sterling Vance has been laundering money through the Henderson acquisition, proof that he stole my father's company, and proof that his wife," he sneered the word, turning to look at me in the shadows, "is nothing but a paid hostage." He turned to the audio-visual technician in the booth overlooking the ballroom. "Play it. I sent you the files. Play it now or I release the server. Kill codes." The technician, who had been briefed by Sterling 3 hours ago, nodded. "Play it," Sterling said softly. Liam grinned. It was the grin of a man who believes he has just won the Super Bowl. He turned to the massive LED screen behind the stage, waiting to see his fabricated spreadsheets and doctored emails destroy his enemy. The screen flickered to life, but it was not a spreadsheet. It was a video, grainy, shaky, shot from a phone hidden in a coat pocket. The audio boomed through the high-end speakers, crystal clear. "I sold them insurance. Goliath is going to launch a cyber attack on the Nexus servers on the night of the Winter Solstice Gala. They will crash the platform. The stock will tank." The face on the screen was Liam's. He was sitting on my grandmother's porch swing, his face twisted in greed. The real Liam, standing on stage, froze. His grin vanished, replaced by a look of absolute, hollow horror. The video continued. "We can be rich, real rich, not just allowance rich." Then, the audio cut to the phone call from yesterday. $5 million, cash, unmarked, or the servers burn. The ballroom erupted. It was not the polite murmuring of a scandal. It was the roar of outrage. The board members of Nexus Global were on their feet. The press corps was in a frenzy, cameras flashing rapidly to capture the death of a reputation. Liam stumbled back, staring at the screen. "No," he whispered. "No, that is fake. That is AI. It is a confession," Sterling said. His voice was not shouted, yet it cut through the noise like a blade. "And it is admissible evidence." At that moment, the double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. "Federal agents, nobody move." 12 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and cybercrimes divisions swarmed into the room. They did not look like party guests. They moved with tactical precision. "Liam Miller," the lead agent shouted, "you are under arrest for corporate espionage, extortion, and conspiracy to commit cyber-terrorism." The crowd parted like the Red Sea to let the agents through. On stage, Liam looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the agents, then at the crowd, then at his date. The blonde woman let go of his arm as if he were radioactive. She backed away, her heels slipping on the polished floor, and then she turned and ran, disappearing into the kitchen service entrance without looking back once. Liam was alone. He looked at Sterling. Sterling was standing still, watching him with cold indifference. Then, Liam looked at me. I stepped out of the shadows. The red dress caught the stage lights. making me look like I was engulfed in flames. I looked at him, and I did not hide the pity in my eyes. Something in Liam snapped. The narcissist within him could not handle the humiliation. He could not handle losing to the girl he had discarded. "You bitch!" he screamed. He lunged. He did not go for Sterling. He came for me. He covered the distance between us in 2 strides. His hands curled into claws. His face contorted into a mask of pure violence. I did not move. I did not flinch. Because I knew who was standing next to me. Before Liam could get within 3 feet of me, a blur of motion intercepted him. Sterling did not brawl. He did not throw a wild punch. He moved with the terrifying efficiency of a man who had trained for years to protect what was his. He stepped into Liam's path, blocked the strike with his left forearm, and used Liam's own momentum against him, with a sharp twist and a sickening thud. Sterling drove his shoulder into Liam's chest, knocking the wind out of him, and swept his legs. Liam hit the stage floor hard. Before he could scramble up, Sterling had his arm twisted behind his back in a submission hold that pinned him helplessly to the ground. Sterling's knee was pressed against Liam's spine. It was over in 3 seconds. The room was dead silent. "Stay down," Sterling hissed, his voice audible only to those of us on stage. Before I break it, the FBI agents rushed the stage, hauling Liam up and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. He was gasping for air. His white dinner jacket stained with stage dust. His hair wild. He looked small. He looked pathetic. The agents began to drag him away. "Wait," I said. The command was soft, but the agents stopped. They looked at Sterling. Sterling nodded once. I walked over to Liam. I stood directly in front of him. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with hate and tears. "You ruined everything," he spat. "I made you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized that I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just the indifference one feels for a stranger who was rude in traffic. "You did not make me, Liam," I said, my voice steady and clear. "You abandoned me, and in doing so, you gave me the space to find out who I really was." I leaned in closer, so only he could hear the final nail in the coffin. "Thank you for not marrying me," I whispered. "It was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me." I stepped back. "Get him out of here." The agents dragged him off the stage. The cameras followed him, the flashes blinding and relentless. He was being documented in his lowest moment. Just as I had been on the church steps, the symmetry was perfect. The circle was closed. The doors closed behind him. The silence in the ballroom was thick, filled with the shock of what had just transpired. 600 people were staring at the stage, waiting to see what would happen next. Sterling stood up. He adjusted his cuffs. He smoothed the front of his jacket. He looked unruffled, as if he had just finished a mild workout, rather than a takedown of a federal criminal. He walked over to me. He reached out and gently adjusted the sapphire necklace at my throat, his fingers brushing against my pulse point. I was calm. My heart was steady. Sterling turned to the crowd. He looked at the stunned faces of the investors, the competitors, the society matriarchs. He smiled, not the shark smile, but the charming, easy smile of a man who has nothing left to prove. "Apologies for the interruption," Sterling said, his voice smooth as silk. "It appears the entertainment was a bit more interactive than we planned." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. "However," Sterling continued, wrapping his arm around my waist and pulling me into his side, presenting us as a united, unbreakable front. "The bar is still open, the music is ready, and my wife looks too beautiful to waste this evening on police reports." He looked down at me, his eyes shining with pride and love. "Shall we continue, Mrs. Vance?" I looked up at him. I looked at the man who had fought for me, bled for me, and schemed for me. "We shall," I said. The orchestra, taking the cue, struck up a waltz. The tension broke. The applause started tentative at first, then thunderous. It was not polite applause. It was the applause of a crowd that knew they were witnessing the rise of a new dynasty. Sterling led me to the center of the dance floor. He took my hand. We spun into the music, surrounded by the blur of lights and the adoration of the city, leaving the ghosts of the past outside in the cold, dark night. The doors of the police cruiser slammed shut, sealing Liam Miller away in a world of fluorescent lights and legal fees, as the flashing red and blue lights faded into the night. The atmosphere inside the ballroom of the Sterling Grand underwent a chemical change. The tension that had held the room captive evaporated, replaced by a collective exhale that sounded like the pop of 1,000 champagne corks. The music returned, softer this time. The guests, who had been gaping in shock just moments ago, turned their eyes toward us, but the gaze was different now. It was no longer the hungry, judgmental stare of vultures waiting for a carcass. It was a look of genuine reverence. They had seen the fire, and they had seen us walk through it without getting burned. Mrs. Vance, the wife of the mayor, approached, her eyes shining with admiration. "That was the most composed thing I have ever seen. You are a force of nature, my dear." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, though my hand was gripping Sterling's arm tight enough to leave a mark. We navigated the room for another hour. We shook hands. We accepted apologies from board members who, just that morning, had wanted to fire me. We smiled until my cheeks ached. But beneath the golden glow of the chandeliers and the hum of social victory, I felt a sudden, overwhelming need for silence. I needed to hear my own thoughts. I needed to hear his thoughts, without the filter of a public performance. "Sterling," I whispered, leaning into his shoulder as we stood near the orchestra. "Get me out of here." Sterling looked down at me. He saw the fatigue hiding behind my smile. He nodded once, sharp and decisive. "The car is out front," he said. "Let us disappear." We slipped out through the side entrance, leaving the adoration and the noise behind. The winter air outside was biting, a sharp shock against my skin that felt cleansing. The limousine was waiting, engine idling, a beast of comfort ready to whisk us back to the penthouse. But when the driver opened the door, Sterling paused. He looked at the expanse of Lake Michigan across the street. The water was pitch black, restless, churning against the concrete shore. The wind was howling, stripping the last dead leaves from the trees. It was wild and cold and real. "Walk with me," Sterling asked, offering his hand. It was madness. I was wearing a silk dress and heels. He was in a tuxedo. It was 20 degrees. But I looked at the lake, and then I looked at him, and I knew there was no other place I wanted to be. "Okay," I said. Sterling took off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over my shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him, that intoxicating blend of sandalwood and the faint, metallic scent of the night. He pulled me close, wrapping his arm around my waist to shield me from the wind, and we walked toward the water. The city noise faded until there was only the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the breakwall and the sound of our footsteps on the pavement. We walked in silence for a long time, letting the adrenaline of the evening drain away into the dark water. We stopped at a railing overlooking the lake. The city skyline rose up behind us, a glittering mountain range of steel and glass. Nexus Global was out there, a shining beacon of the empire we had just saved. But standing here, in the dark, it felt small. I leaned against the railing, pulling the jacket tighter around me. I looked at Sterling. The wind was messing up his perfect hair, making him look less like a CEO and more like a man who had just survived a storm. "So," I said, my voice barely audible over the wind, "we did it. Liam is gone. The company is safe. The Henderson deal is secure." "We did," Sterling agreed, watching the waves. "The contract," I continued, forcing the words out past the lump in my throat. "The terms were specific. We needed to stay married until the deal closed and the reputation was salvaged. Technically, we have achieved the objective ahead of schedule." Sterling went still. He did not look at me. He stared out at the black horizon where the water met the sky. "Is that how you see it?" he asked quietly. "Objective achieved." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the precipice. I could step back into safety, or I could jump. I see a contract that has served its purpose, I said, my voice trembling. I see a fake marriage that doesn't need to be fake anymore because there is no one left to fool. Sterling turned to me slowly. His face was unreadable in the shadows, but his eyes were burning. "You are right," he said. "The contract is done." I felt a cold stone drop in my stomach. Was this it? Was he going to thank me for my services and offer me a generous severance package? "Sterling," I started, panic rising. "Stop," he commanded softly. He reached into the pocket of his trousers. My breath hitched. I expected him to pull out a phone, or a cigarette, or maybe the keys to the penthouse. Instead, he pulled out a small, velvet box. It was navy blue, worn at the edges. Not the pristine box from a high-end jeweler that he had surely used for the prop ring he gave me at the altar. This box looked like it had been carried around in a pocket for a long time. Sterling looked at the box, then at me. "I bought this 3 weeks ago," he confessed. "The day I bought your grandmother's house. I carried it to Paris. I had it in my pocket when I tore up the divorce papers in the boardroom. I had it tonight, when I took down Liam." He took a deep breath. And then, Sterling Vance, the man who never bowed, the man who brought companies to their knees, did the impossible. He sank down onto one knee on the cold concrete. I gasped, my hands flying to my mouth. The wind whipped my hair around my face, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "Sterling," I whispered, "what are you doing? You will ruin your trousers." "I do not care about the trousers," he said, looking up at me. His expression was open, vulnerable, stripped of all defenses. "I care about the woman standing in front of me." He opened the box. Inside sat a ring. It was not a diamond, it was a sapphire, dark and deep as the ocean behind us, surrounded by a halo of small, vintage-cut diamonds. It was elegant, timeless, and uniquely, perfectly me. "The first time I asked you to marry me," Sterling said, his voice thick with emotion, "I did it to save a situation. I did it because I needed a partner, and you were the only one strong enough to stand beside me. I offered you a deal. I offered you protection." He paused, his thumb brushing the velvet of the box. "But I do not want a partner anymore, Eloise, and I do not want to just protect you. I want to be the man who wakes up next to you every morning for the next 50 years. I want to argue with you about coffee blends. I want to watch you build your own empire. I want to be the one holding your hand when the world gets too loud." Tears spilled over my lashes, hot and fast, tracking down my cold cheeks. "I want to marry you," Sterling continued, his voice cracking slightly. "Not for the board, not for the press, not for revenge. I want to marry you because I cannot breathe when you are not in the room. I want to marry you because you are the love of my life." He held the ring up higher. "Eloise Hardwick, will you do me the extraordinary honor of being my real wife? No contracts, no exit clauses, just us." I looked at him, kneeling in the dirt and the cold, offering me his heart in a velvet box. I thought about the girl who had stood on the church steps, humiliated and alone. I thought about the emptiness I had felt for so years, and then I looked at Sterling, and I saw my future. "Yes," I choked out, nodding frantically. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Sterling let out a ragged breath, a sound of pure relief. He stood up and pulled the ring from the box. He took my left hand, my shaking, cold hand, and slid the sapphire onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Then he pulled me to him. He kissed me, and the world fell away. There was no wind, no cold, no lake. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the strength of his arms, and the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. We stood there under the moonlight, two broken pieces that had found each other and fused into something unbreakable. 6 months later, the air smelled of lilac and rain. It was a soft, gentle Saturday morning in late June. The church was small, a little stone chapel not far from the house on Maplewood Drive. It had wooden pews that creaked and stained glass windows that painted the floor in pools of red and blue light. There were no news vans outside. There were no security guards checking IDs. There were only 50 people inside our families, my closest friends, and a few of the colleagues who had stood by me when the storm was at its worst. I stood in the vestibule, adjusting my veil. It was a new veil, simple and sheer. My dress was not a $15,000 statement piece. It was a vintage lace gown I had found with my mother, delicate and romantic. "Ready, sweetheart?" my father asked, offering his arm. He looked handsome and proud, his gambling days a distant memory, his dignity restored. "I am ready, Dad," I said. The organ music started. It wasn't Pachelbel's canon. It was a soft, acoustic version of "Can't Help Falling in Love." The doors opened. I stepped onto the runner. I looked down the aisle. There were no phones raised, no flashes blinding me, just smiling faces. I saw my mother wiping her eyes. I saw Helena Vance in the front row, looking imperious but nodding her approval. And at the end of the aisle, standing in front of the altar, was Sterling. He was not checking his watch. He was not looking at a phone. He was looking at me. His hands were clasped in front of him, but I could see his knuckles were white. When our eyes met, his face broke into a smile that lit up the dimly lit church. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. I saw his lips move. I couldn't hear him, but I knew what he said. "Wow." I walked toward him. I didn't trip. I didn't falter. Every step was light, lighter than air. When I reached the altar, my father kissed my cheek and placed my hand in Sterling's. Sterling's hand was warm and solid. He squeezed my fingers, grounding me. "Hi," he whispered. "Hi," I whispered back. The ceremony was short. The vows were written on crumpled pieces of paper that we had agonized over the night before. "I promise to be your shelter," Sterling said, his voice thick with emotion as he slid a simple gold band next to the sapphire. "To protect you, to honor you, and to never let you face the darkness alone again. I promise to be your light," I vowed, my voice steady and sure. "To challenge you, to support you, and to love you through every storm and every silence. I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest said. Beaming, "You may kiss the bride." Sterling didn't wait. He pulled me close, dipping me slightly, and kissed me with a passion that made the small congregation cheer. It was a kiss of promise, a kiss of forever. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, stepping out into the bright summer sunshine, I squeezed his hand. I thought back to that terrible day in the cathedral, the day my world had collapsed. I thought about the pain, the humiliation, the fear, and as I looked up at my husband, laughing as rice rained down on us, I realized something profound. I was grateful for the heartbreak. I was grateful for the abandonment. Because if I hadn't been left in the dark, I never would have found the hand that pulled me into the light. I was Eloise Vance, and my story was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on Eloise and Sterling's journey. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story. Your support means the world to us.